October 4th, 1982. Frank Lefty Rosenthal finishes dinner at a Las Vegas restaurant and heads out to his black Cadillac.
He said, I put the key in the car and an engine started, but I looked up and I saw flames coming out from the windshield.
In seconds, fire engulfs him.
And then suddenly, the whole car blew up.
Native New Yorker Nicholas Pileggi is an award-winning author known for immersing himself in the culture of his favorite subject, the mob. The subject was a familiar one to Pileggi, who was born in 1933 and raised in the Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn.
Bensonhurst was to the mob what the Vatican is to Roman Catholics. And I think it was very helpful when I became a journalist to have had that experience.
In 1986, he collaborated with notorious mob rat Henry Hill on the bestseller which was later made into the Academy Award-winning movie, Goodfellas. Following the film's success, Pileggi started researching another project on the mob.
The biggest thing they did, of course, was to get into the casino business and create Las Vegas.
He discussed his idea with Goodfellas director Martin Scorsese, who was interested. Pileggi then contacted one of Vegas's most fascinating characters, Frank Lefty Rosenthal. Rosenthal, however, didn't want to talk.
And Lefty explained to him, he said, look, I don't care if there's a book done on Las Vegas. It's of no interest to me.
But when Lefty found out the book would be made into a movie by Martin Scorsese, with some of the members of the cast of Goodfellas, he changed his tune.
He loved Bob De Niro in Goodfellas. And when I was able to tell Lefty, Frank Rosenthal, that De Niro would be playing him, his whole aspect changed, and he began to tell me the story of his life, which was an unbelievable story.
The collaboration produced the critically acclaimed book, Casino, the true story of two small-time hoods from Chicago and their chance to rule the desert paradise of Las Vegas.
It was nothing better, and then it collapsed. The whole thing, they just threw it away.
Frank Lefty Rosenthal's brush with death was the culmination of a life lived on the edge, one that began in Chicago in the 1940s.
At the time Lefty was growing up in Chicago, it was a totally corrupt city. It was Jewish and Italian bookmakers, gangsters, gamblers, and he liked the life. And he admired the men who he knew were in the life.
At a young age, he learned the ins and outs of sports gambling.
Lefty talks about Wrigley Field out in Chicago, where a section of the bleachers was really a gambling section. It was like a little mini casino. Lefty used to go out and watch a couple of guys who knew the odds on everything that was happening out there. Lefty got excited by the money these guys were making.
Rosenthal realized that if he was going to make his living at this, he would have to do his homework.
Lefty never bet for pleasure. He never bet. It was a business to him, and looked at it professionally. He understood the odds. He had been gathering the data, and the last thing he wanted to believe in was luck.
By the age of 19, Lefty had developed contacts with sports reporters at various college newspapers. They'd give him inside information about their teams.
Top of that, Lefty, coming from the world he came from, also knew how to bribe people. He knew how to go in there and talk to a guy who was an assistant trainer. Give the guy a couple of bucks. The more information Frank Rosenthal had, the better he could evaluate that team's chances that weekend.
Eventually, he'd built an entire network of tipsters who would give him the inside dirt on every gambling scam in the book.
And it wasn't long before he was picked up by one of the organized crime captains in Chicago. Lefty proved to a lot of guys in the Chicago mob that he was a tremendous earner. I mean, he could make a lot of money for them. And as a result, he was able to do whatever bookmaking or whatever handicapping he wanted to do with the umbrella of protection from those guys.
One of the men who watched Rosenthal's back was a young, tough guy named Anthony Spilatro. Tony Spilatro was 10 years younger than Lefty and had grown up on the city's west side, just a few blocks from Lefty's house.
In Chicago, he was basically a muscle and a strong-arm man, and people were terrified of him. It was sort of amazing because he was not a big man, he was very diminutive.
In a 1996 interview, Frank Rosenthal reminisced about his early days with Tony Spilatro.
I just met Tony somewhat by accident at a very, very young age, and we just seemed to click. Tony was fascinated by the gambling and my ability to predict an outcome of a sporting event.
Tony loved to gamble. He would come up to Lefty with his list of picks. These are my picks, these are my picks. Lefty would look at it. He said, no, that one's okay, that one's okay.
To protect his friend and advisor, Tony would beat to a pulp any street guys who messed with Lefty or didn't give him the proper respect. Over the course of their friendship, Tony delivered a number of these messages, always making sure that Lefty didn't get his hands dirty. Rosenthal witnessed several beatings on his behalf. Tony's mission was to show his worth to the family as an enforcer. He set his sights on becoming a made man.
That is what a lot of these kids, like Tony Spilatro, wanted more than anything in the world. Guys who are officially made men. They're looking for kids who are tough, kids who have nerve, kids who aren't afraid of the cops, kids that don't have to be home at 11 o'clock, and kids who are looking to hustle and make money for themselves and not work. And Tony chose that life.
But Lefty was more interested in business than violence.
Lefty wasn't one of them. Lefty's not a tough man. Lefty doesn't do anything like that.
In 1960, Lefty had his first pinch as a bookmaker, which branded him as a known gambler with the Chicago Crime Commission. Soon, he decided to get out of town and start gambling strictly for himself.
He could go so far in Chicago. On top of that, Lefty doesn't like cold weather. And so he went down to Miami. Miami was a winter place for every wise guy in America. The big hotels went up, the Fontainebleau, the Eden, I think it's just great hotels. You had the track there, you had the dog track, you had the racetrack, you had illegal casinos on the outskirts, and he went down there to try to make a living and was probably going to do very, very well. But his reputation in Chicago was such that it followed him to Miami.
You set up and you don't give us our take?
The Miami police immediately went to him and said, you're opening up a bookmaking operation down here. We want our take.
I'll do it again, too.
Stubborn Lefty, instead of taking care of them, give him a couple of $100 a week, says, oh, look, I'm not going to pay you if I don't have to.
You're going down. You're going to pay.
And they made life miserable for Lefty in Florida and just kept going after him.
After 6 years and a number of arrests for illegal bookmaking in Miami, Frank Rosenthal had had enough.
And he said, what am I doing here? This is ludicrous. Why, if I do exactly what I'm doing here, if I did it in Nevada, I don't have a thing to worry about. The hell with it.
He decided to move where the betting action was hot and legal, Las Vegas. But it was in Vegas that Lefty would forget his most important rule: never bet on a long shot. Las Vegas in the late 60s is a land of plenty. Set in the middle of the vast Mojave Desert, the sun shines in a clear blue sky almost every day. By night, it is a town that thrives on glitter and glamour. Bright lights, beautiful women, fancy cars. A town full of money, a place where anything goes.
No visit is complete without experiencing this dazzling downtown area.
It is a dream come true for Frank Lefty Rosenthal, who arrives in Vegas from Miami in 1967, hoping for a fresh start.
Lefty was attracted to Vegas, and a lot of people are attracted to Vegas, because it's sort of the ultimate American city. You'll go there to start a new life. It's a kind of morality car wash. When you get there, you're clean and new.
Lefty thrives, quickly making himself a rich man. His handicapping abilities keep him on top of the Vegas game. Betting strictly for himself against the biggest bookmakers in the country, during the football season he wins every Monday night game but one. People soon take notice.
His success is phenomenal. He's very well known and he's highly regarded, and he's probably as happy as he could possibly be, except I think he's sort of lonely.
Enter 31-year-old Jerry McGee.
Jerry was a Las Vegas girl. She had been around the block a couple of times, as they used to say. She was looking to get out of that life.
They meet in the Tropicana where Jerry has been working as a dancer, and Lefty falls hard.
She was just a fascinating, great woman. Truly beautiful, had been a dancer, had even done topless stuff in Vegas at the time. And whatever she had in personality, it suited him.
Jerry is one of the best-known hustlers in town.
She had been a chip hustler, which means you'd be with a guy and he'd be with you, and you know, you'd grab some of his $100 chips or $1,000 chips and put them in your purse. It was part of what he did for you to be with him. She had a number of what you would call friends at that point in her life.
For her, a guy like Frank Rosenthal is the ultimate score, and initially, she treats him like one of her suckers.
So the weight of Jerry's heart was clearly money, but he didn't care. What he wanted to do was marry her. I think he was just so attracted to her. I don't think he'd ever been that turned on by anybody before. And she didn't know about whether she wanted to be married, so he had to put aside for her. I suspect it was about $2 million that she would have the key for.
With the money in the bank, Jerry gives in. On May 1st, 1969, Frank and Jerry are married in front of 500 guests at a lavish wedding at Caesar's Palace.
The irony is that this is a guy who never believed in luck, never believed in long shots. He married the biggest long shot there was.
Along with her hustling past, Jerry is known to drink to excess.
She did have a drinking problem, no question about that. But Lefty, being the kind of guy he was, said, it's okay, we'll get rid of it. We'll take care of your baggage, He always felt you could logically and intelligently deal with things, even deal with emotions.
He has his wife, and he's making a fortune as a freelance gambler. But the long days are starting to get to the 41-year-old Lefty. Then in 1971, an old friend from Chicago, Bobby Stella, gives him the opportunity to work at the Stardust Casino. Rosenthal begins working at the Stardust as a floorman and realizes that he has found his calling.
You gotta remember, Lefty is the mathematician. He is the guy who doesn't believe in luck. Las Vegas, all of his customers believe in nothing but luck. So right away, Lefty looks upon everybody out there as a sucker. All they're doing is shoveling money in your pocket.
Lefty runs the casino with an iron fist and soon gets a chance to expand his kingdom.
The casino changed hands, and Alan Glick, a financier who had managed to get a Teamster loan, bought the Stardust and 3 other casinos.
By getting a $62 million loan through the Teamsters pension fund, Glick gets more than he bargained for. He's now beholden to the mafia, which uses the Teamsters fund to position legitimate men like Glick as fronts to run hotels and casinos in Vegas.
As long as the Teamsters and the mob could control who owned the casino, they could control the count room. That was the source of their power. Not muscles, there was money.
Glick's casinos soon become a cash cow for the Midwestern mob bosses, who include Joe Aiuppa from Chicago, Nick Savella from Kansas City, and Frank Balistreri from Milwaukee.
They want their men in the count room. Once their guys control the count room, then they can produce the skim.
The skim is the money pulled from the day's take that goes directly to the mob bosses back in the Midwest. Although Lefty doesn't have anything to do with the skim directly, he is in charge of the casino, which assures the mob that their men in the counting room will be left alone.
The people in the count room are a world to themselves. And if they're all in on it, some guy comes in, nobody pays attention to him, he goes to the closet, there's just stacks and stacks of money, he takes whatever it is, puts it in the suitcase, walks right out the door, gets on a plane, flies to Chicago or Milwaukee or wherever, and whacks up, divides the money.
By 1971, Rosenthal is making a fortune with his gambling winnings, but he doesn't have a gaming license, and with his rap sheet and mob ties, he knows that the powerful Las Vegas Gaming Commission isn't likely to give him one. So he is given a job title at the Stardust that doesn't require a license: food and beverage manager. The employees have no doubt, however, that Lefty is in charge.
Lefty was a tyrant. That's all there was to him.
While Lefty may have a long rap sheet, he won't have any outside people cheating at his tables.
Lefty made sure nobody robbed it because it was a matter of pride.
We just made sure that we sent you a very strong message, and we asked you to tell your friends, and if you had any sense of understanding and survival, you just wouldn't come back. We had some situations there where people were roughed up.
In 1971, the Gaming Commission hears that a mob-connected bookie is in charge of the Stardust Casino. Officials keep an eye on him, but try as they might, they can't prove that Lefty has anything to do with running the casino. So Lefty continues raking in the cash. With a sexy wife and money to burn, he is the epitome of high-living Las Vegas. But his past is about to close in on him. Back in Chicago, Lefty's old pal Tony Spilatro participates in a mob hit that earns him the coveted position of a made man in the Chicago outfit. Word soon hits the streets that Tony had tortured the man for 2 days, then put his head in a vise and tightened it until one of the man's eyes popped out. Tony is proud of his participation in the gruesome killing, but with the heat coming down, he has to get out of town.
Tony was looking at lots of possibilities, so why not go to Vegas? Las Vegas was basically an open town. It wasn't controlled by any one organized crime family. And on top of that, one of his old friends was running a casino out there.
When Tony arrives in the spring of 1971, he is in awe of all that his old friend Lefty has accomplished. He wants a share of the Vegas gold mine and asks Frank if he has any objections to his moving out there. Because of their past ties, Lefty has to give him his blessing, but he warns Tony that Vegas is nothing like Chicago.
He cautioned Tony, you'll own the cops in Chicago. The cops in Vegas are not Easterners. They're basically cowboys. They're gunslingers. If anyone stepped out of line, Las Vegas cops in those days would pick you up and they'd dig a hole in the desert and they'd bury you.
But Tony doesn't care. He wants a piece of the action, and there's nothing Frank can say to change his mind.
Tony loved to gamble, and there was a great possibility of making a good career for himself and getting away from the heat in Chicago. The exact opposite happened. The heat followed him.
Trouble of a different kind would soon engulf Lefty Rosenthal's Vegas paradise. In 1971, Lefty Rosenthal is at the top of his game. He is running the Stardust Casino and living in a $1 million home with his ex-showgirl wife. For years, Vegas has been a relatively quiet place. The mob has been making so much money with their bookmaking, loan sharking, and casino skimming that they want to keep the town free of violence. The last thing they need is extra scrutiny from law enforcement, and they certainly don't want to scare away the tourists.
There was a lot of money. Everybody was splitting money. There was no problem. And it was going very smoothly. And the mob wanted to keep it that way. Who wants to mess around with a gold mine?
The mob has established rules that there are to be no shootings or car bombs. Sanctioned murders must take place away from Vegas. But then Tony Spilatro comes to town. Tony sees that there's money to be made by applying his muscle. He starts shaking down bookmakers and pimps. If they don't pay, they wind up dead.
Okay.
Spilotro also starts his own burglary ring, which includes his younger brother, Michael.
Greg, telling me to discard the...
They steal millions in jewelry from private homes with the help of tipsters around town.
And a lot of problems arose as a result of it, because a lot of these turned out to be violent entries into places where people were there, people were beaten, tortured, the money was taken.
If the alarm system is too difficult for Spilotro's gang, they smash right through the wall.
Lefty had warned him, keep a low profile, there's plenty of money to be made out here, you'll change your life. But Tony just couldn't, he had gone back to the old ways.
The local cops are well aware of Spilotro's reputation as the Chicago mob's main muscle and hitman. So when crime starts to rise in Vegas, they focus all their attention on him.
The Chicago mob had come to Vegas, and if you're a cop looking for some action, that's a perfect guy to spend all your time on. Who else are you going to go follow?
The FBI is also watching Spilotro closely. They believe he's been sent to oversee the mob's interests in Vegas, and they are determined to find proof that will help them build a case. Lefty Rosenthal has spent years avoiding scrutiny from the Gaming Commission. Now his old friend Tony is bringing law enforcement to him. Lefty is desperate to avoid this guilt by association and does his best to explain this to Tony, away from the watchful eyes of law enforcement.
Lefty would say, Tony, look, stay away from me. Don't come around. Don't get involved with me. I don't want to. And Tony resented Lefty's wanting to be withdrawn from. What's that? You don't like me? What happened to me? Yeah, now you're a big shot. You don't want to talk to me. Tony took it as a slight.
All the while, Frank's home life is getting increasingly tense. His wife Jerry's drinking and pill popping are getting out of hand. She finds married life too confining and often takes off for days at a time. Lefty tries to ignore the tension and continues to build his empire. He is the town's most innovative gambling executive. He is the first to allow female blackjack dealers on the strip, a move that doubles the blackjack drop in a year.
I mean, this is the guy who found Siegfried and Roy. I mean, Lefty discovered Siegfried and Roy. He says, get them over here, I'll build a stage for them, which he did. I mean, Lefty created the world in Las Vegas of sports betting. There were no sports betting parlors or anything like that in Las Vegas until Lefty got there.
Of course, as his reputation grows, so does the Gaming Commission scrutiny. Finally, Rosenthal is forced to apply for a gaming license just like other casino executives. But in 1975, just months before his licensing hearing, Lefty makes a mistake. He fires an incompetent manager who turns out to be friends with Pete Echeverria, chairman of the Gaming Commission. Echeverria tries to persuade Rosenthal to rehire the guy.
And for whatever reason, again, I think it was just Lefty's attention to detail. He felt the guy's errors had been so egregious, and he just was not going to do it. It turned a lot of the local people against him. They felt, oh, he's another one of these guys from the East who come in here thinking they own this town.
Lefty's licensing hearing before the Gaming Commission takes place in January 1976. Throughout, the commission peppers him with questions about his past mob ties, in particular, his friendship with Tony Spilotro. Lefty can't explain away his associations, and the commission denies him a license. Rosenthal is devastated. This not only means he can no longer set foot in the Stardust, he is banned from gaming altogether.
He felt that he was paying the price for a lot of stuff that really wasn't of his doing.
When violence became, in fact, a part of life, there were accusations made against Tony, and anything Tony did within that state was a reflection on Frank Rosenthal.
The animosity between the two of them is rising to a dangerous level.
You never knew what Tony might do. He could just snap. And maybe the next day he'd be sorry he did what he did, but you might be dead.
In 1976, the Las Vegas Gaming Commission forces Lefty Rosenthal out of his beloved casinos. But he has no intention of giving up or going away. He continues to oversee the action at the Stardust from his house by hooking into the casino's eye-in-the-sky monitoring system. But with Frank spending more time at home, the problems with his marriage to Jerry become more pronounced.
Lefty is really adamant about she giving up drinking and giving up pills, and so she's fighting with him always. It's very clear to her that he's probably having affairs. She starts having affairs. I mean, it was one of those marriages at that point.
But Lefty won't have to remain at home for long. On December 2nd, 1976, a Las Vegas District Court judge with personal ties to Lefty rules that he should be reinstated to his position at the Stardust Casino. Rosenthal is back in action. To avoid conflicts with the gaming board, he takes on the job title of Entertainment Director.
Tonight, live, the all-new Frank Rosenthal Show!
One of his new responsibilities is hosting a local television talk show to promote the hotel. Now, Lefty goes against his own code and abandons his low profile.
I think he really liked it, and I think being the Johnny Carson of Las Vegas and having everybody, Muhammad Ali, Frank Sinatra, anybody who came to Vegas would go on his television show.
Why did you trust this guy?
But the damage his celebrity causes with his old mob buddies back in the Midwest is immeasurable.
The Chicago mob knew him as a handicapper and a gambler. They would have preferred if Lefty was under the radar screen. I mean, did he have to be on television? He's just calling attention to everything.
Meanwhile, Tony Spilatro resents the fact that Lefty is a Vegas star, and the mobster begins to develop his own delusions of grandeur.
Las Vegas, as everyone knew, is an open town. There's no Las Vegas mob family or boss. He was clearly the most dominant force out there. And he began to try to see whether he could put together an organized crime family in Las Vegas and be a boss. It would be the first time that had ever happened.
Tony turns to his old friend, Lefty, for help.
Lefty's vouching for Tony would have been a big help to Tony. And Lefty said, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't organize here. You should go back, stay lower key. He said, what do you mean? I should be low key. You got a television show and you're telling me to be low key?
Tony finds a sympathetic ear with another one of Lefty's associates, his wife, Jerry.
And at the same time, you got to remember Lefty's wife's anger at Lefty. She was drinking more. She and Tony formed the bond, both of them getting angrier and angrier over the months at Lefty. Tony and Jerry hit it off, and they started sneaking around.
But the good life in Vegas is about to come crashing down around them. In May 1978, while investigating a murder in Kansas City, the FBI bugs a local mob hangout. The feds hit the jackpot. They listen in as a number of wise guys discuss the skim, the illegal take from the Las Vegas casinos.
And they mentioned the hotels and casinos. They mentioned who was picking it up. These guys had no idea they were being bugged. And as a result, the FBI couldn't believe their ears. That wire explained to the FBI forever how the skim worked, who the participants were, etc. From then on, it was downhill as far as the skim and the mob was concerned in Las Vegas.
While the FBI's wiretaps eventually lead to the indictments of 8 top bosses, Frank Rosenthal is about to uncover a more personal betrayal. One night in July 1978, he calls Jerry on her car phone.
And a voice picked it up, it was, oh, and he realized it was Tony Spilatro.
He confronts Jerry at home that night, and she admits she has been having an affair with Tony. Frank knows both of them are now in serious danger.
Lefty had to tell Jerry, the one thing you can't do is tell Tony that I know. said, what are you talking about? You can't let him know, because if he knows I know, he will be afraid that I could go back and beef on him to his bosses. And rather than have them take that chance, he'll kill me and he'll kill you. And the only way we can save our lives at this point, knowing Tony, is for you to stop having the affair with him and to not ever let him know that I know. Because if he knows I know, he's going to kill us.
Jerry convinces him that she'll end the affair, but Lefty knows that's no guarantee that she will.
His wife is addicted to pills and alcohol. She's not in control of her faculties. When she's sober and straight, of course she'll never tell Tony. But what if she winds up in a situation with Tony and she gets mad at Tony and wants to make Tony furious, and she said, I told her, she's capable of doing anything.
Jerry's affair with Tony is the worst kept secret in town, and it's the final blow to the marriage.
Lefty at that point was so disgusted with her and so angry at her that he was looking to divorce her anyway. She wanted the divorce. She would leave him in a minute, but she wanted the millions of dollars he had put in that safety deposit box for her. Eventually, just for peace, he did give her the money, and she did take off.
Jerry leaves Vegas behind in the fall of 1980. In just a few short years since his arrival in Vegas, Tony Spilatro has managed to turn Lefty's desert utopia into a living hell, and it's not over yet. In June 1979, one of Tony's own gang, Sal Romano, agrees to turn on his old friend in exchange for immunity. To do so, he plans a jewel heist sting with the feds. FBI agents set up surveillance across the street from the jewelry store Tony's gang plans to rob.
Nobody is slippery enough to be able to stay out from under an indictment forever. And I think that's what happened to Tony.
On July 4th, 1981, Spilatro and the members of his gang are caught and arrested as they try to rob the jewelry store. For the first time, the FBI feels they have a solid case against Tony, who is eventually freed on a $180,000 bond. Lefty Rosenthal is now a marked man. He's feuding with hitman Tony Spilatro just as 8 mob bosses are about to go on trial for skimming money from Las Vegas casinos. Despite his standing with the mob as a top earner, Lefty Rosenthal simply knows too much, and the mob could decide to take him out at any moment.
Mr. Balustrade, what is your date of birth, please?
It's none of your business.
The most dangerous time in a mob situation is before a trial, when huge bosses are on trial, and you know something that could put them in jail. Now, you might not be a government witness. You may not even be on the witness list that the government gives to the defense attorneys. But, as somebody said, why take a chance? Anyone at that point who the mob guys felt were vulnerable, they decided to eliminate.
1982. The FBI has uncovered the mob's casino skimming operation. Lefty Rosenthal's marriage has fallen apart, and his life is in danger. Top mob bosses are about to go on trial for skimming money from the casinos of Las Vegas. No one is safe from their wrath. And Lefty is still feuding with the volatile Tony Spilatro.
With a guy like Tony, you're always concerned, especially if you had such an intimate relationship with him, and if he perceives that you had something to do with his downfall, even unintentionally, you don't want to be that person. And Lefty clearly had made an enemy of Tony.
October 4th, 1982. Rosenthal finishes dinner at Marie Callender's restaurant. He walks out to his 1981 Cadillac Eldorado.
He said, it all went slow, he said. I put the key in the car, and the engine started, But I looked up and I saw flames coming out from the windshield. And he said the flames started getting bigger. And he said, I reached for the door and I noticed this whole wall was a sheet of flames. I just pushed my hand into the flame, grabbed the door jamb, opened it, and tumbled out of the car.
It is only then that he realizes that he is on fire. Two men from the restaurant run to his aid.
They grabbed him and brought him to the side, and the car is sitting there, and they said, stay down, stay down.
As the three of them duck for cover, the fire reaches the gas tank.
And then suddenly, the whole car blew up.
The blast is so intense, it blows out the windows of the restaurant across the street. The only thing that saves Lefty, the 1981 Eldorado Cadillac, has a steel floor plate under the driver's seat that shields him from the bomb's initial explosion.
I've never talked to a man who actually got blown up in a car. They were all dead. A couple of people have commented it's just amazing that, it was pure luck that Cadillac had put that plate under the seat that year. And the one thing Lefty never believed in is the thing that wound up saving his life, pure luck.
The FBI sees the attack as a chance to lure Rosenthal into the witness protection program if he agrees to testify against his associates. But Lefty refuses.
There's Lefty walking around with a bandage on his head. I mean, he actually survived a car bombing. So it was very clear that somebody was trying to kill him. And he still said, I don't know anything.
In fact, Frank doesn't know for sure who planted the car bomb, but the FBI points the finger at Tony Spilatro.
Everybody seemed to feel that it was Tony's goodbye to Lefty, that he had been so angered by him that one of the guys who Tony knows went off and put a bomb on the Lefty's car to kill him.
Lefty was lucky. He survived. Tony, Jerry, and the mob paradise of Las Vegas share a different fate. On November 6, 1982, a month after the car bombing, Jerry dies in Los Angeles of an apparent drug overdose. She was 46 years old.
Lefty, I think, to this day still loves her. I mean, loves the Jerry before the drugs and the alcohol.
Soon after Jerry's death, the trial of the Midwestern bosses begins. Stardust Casino owner Alan Glick receives immunity in exchange for his testimony and proves to be a devastating witness. In addition to exposing the skim at the Stardust, the trial also reveals the mob's control over Vegas. The guilty verdicts and stiff sentences that result from the trial are no surprise. The aging mob bosses will spend the rest of their lives in prison.
And once you got the mob out of the count room and out of the ownership position, the town went amazingly clean.
Tony Spilatro is also indicted. His trial is delayed while he has bypass surgery. He never makes it to the courtroom.
Tony had made a lot of enemies by some of the stuff that was going on in Las Vegas. And he had been called back to Chicago by the bosses because they were angry at what had been created there.
Yeah, I'll bring Mike.
Tony knew something was coming. He was going to have a meeting that was going to straighten things out.
Both Tony and his brother Michael, who is part of his crew, are called to a meeting outside Chicago in rural Indiana.
How you doing?
How's it going?
It turns out the meeting was going to take place in a cornfield, and which is okay because there are so many wires and you got the trial. So they go to see these guys, and at some point, one of them hits Tony with the bat. Hits the brother with the bat, and they hold Tony while they killed Michael with the bat. And then threw him into a pre-dug grave. And then they beat Tony to death with the bat and threw him in.
2 weeks later, a farmer finds the bodies. Their faces so badly beaten, it isn't until the FBI lab runs their fingerprints that the men are identified as Tony Spilatro and his brother Michael. The Las Vegas of today bears little trace of the mobsters who built the city, and most of the old-school mystique is gone.
When public corporations took these places over, they saw it different. They saw it as a town where you could go with your wife, with your kids, with your family. You build a casino on a theme of some sort. You make it Egyptian. You make it Paris. You make New York, New York. So that's the new Vegas. People show up, people go there, no one knows anyone. So on that level of the old high roller fun place, it's no longer that place.
As for Lefty Rosenthal, one of the men who made Vegas, for a short time, a glamorous outlaw oasis in the desert, he now lives in Boca Raton, Florida, where he works as a sports handicapper. It's a living, but it's a long way from paradise. Lefty once hoped to return to Vegas, but in 1988, he was placed in the Gaming Control Board's so-called Black Book of Undesirables, forbidding him to set foot in a casino ever again.
Well, I could sneak in. Oh, you didn't know that? I'm capable of wearing a beard and a wig and a mustache, just like anybody else is. I mean, piece of cake. I sneak in and out of Vegas all the time.
When Nicholas Pileggi embarked on this story, he was already a mob aficionado. Nonetheless, he was still awed by how much Lefty Rosenthal had won and how much he ultimately lost.
In the end, Lefty winds up taking off. Tony's dead. The mob bosses are in prison. I mean, it's an amazing thing because at a certain point, they were on top of the world. They owned it. These guys literally owned Las Vegas. It was paradise. They had paradise. It was nothing better. And then it collapsed. The whole thing, they just threw it away. And it was the last time street guys like Tony and Frank were ever going to be able to take a place like Vegas again. It was over.
They don't call it Sin City for nothing. Las Vegas is a place where a lot of vices that are illegal elsewhere are perfectly acceptable. It's also a place where organized crime enjoyed a safe haven for close to 40 years. In fact, without the mob, the Sin City we know today might never have come to be.
3, 2, 1, fire.
Las Vegas, Nevada is not a city that treats its history kindly. In the 1990s, no fewer than 5 landmark properties are imploded to make room for new construction. But no matter how many buildings are reduced to rubble, Las Vegas cannot erase the memory of the men who helped create this city. Far from civic heroes, these are men with nicknames like Bugsy or the Ant. Men who sealed business deals with a handshake, but sometimes settled grudges with a gun, a knife, or a bat.
We're not going to implode any of our history. We're not going to hide any of it. We're proud of it, and that's the wonderful thing about Las Vegas. That's what makes us different, the fact that we are different from anybody else.
Good morning, Your Honor.
How are you, Chair?
Las Vegas Mayor Oscar Goodman isn't afraid to dredge up the ghosts of mob history in his city. During a 35-year career as a criminal attorney, Goodman defended many suspected mobsters, from Meyer Lansky to Anthony Spilatro, one of the men the movie Casino is based on.
What is it with you? All of a sudden you're trying to tell me what to do all the time.
I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but you're way out of line, Nick. What are you doing? Where's your head?
Goodman says most of his clients weren't just good fellas, they were good people.
I mean, this is not Tony Soprano. These are people who really had good family lives, and that's with a little f. They went home, they took care of their family business, and took care of their kids and their wives, and they really were contributing members to our community.
The mob's reign in Vegas spans only about 40 years, but in that time the city underwent a remarkable transformation. From a sleepy town on the edge of a desert to a bustling metropolis full of neon and excitement. Such dramatic change can only happen with vision and lots of money. And both arrive in the 1940s in the form of a New York gangster named Benjamin Siegel.
He envisioned that this would be a mecca for gambling and for entertainment and for fine food. And it takes a visionary in order to see the potential of that in a raw desert.
Siegel is part of the East Coast mob, affiliated with Meyer Lansky and Charles Lucky Luciano. He's sent to Los Angeles in the 30s to oversee West Coast operations and finds the lifestyle to his liking. Handsome and smooth, Siegel befriends actors and dates Hollywood starlets. But he has a dark side, prone to violence and psychotic outbreaks, earning him the nickname Bugsy.
The idea was that he had bugs in his head, that he was nuts, and he took great umbrage at that. His name was Ben, and he'd take Ben or Benny, but he sure didn't like to be called Bugsy. It might hurt you if you called him that.
Hal Rothman, a history professor at UNLV and the author of Neon Metropolis, says Siegel's early vision for Las Vegas still resonates today.
Instead of seeing sawdust-floored casinos with prospectors in them, what he saw was Monte Carlo and Havana in the desert. What he saw was a place where he could be legal, where you could set up casinos and you could have high-level entertainment, and you could be chic and you could be cool and you could be classy.
With mob backing, Siegel begins construction on a hotel casino named the Flamingo. But almost immediately, the project runs into trouble. There are construction delays, cost overruns, and a big loss at the tables on opening night. By the time the Flamingo does turn a profit, it's too late to save Bugsy. On June 20th, 1947, while visiting Los Angeles, he is shot in the back of the head. The gunman is never found, but the culprit is clear.
Within minutes of him being shot, before news reports or anything were out about it, 3 men walked into the Flamingo and said, "We're in charge now. We're the new management team."
One of those men is Gus Greenbaum, who runs afoul of the mob a decade later when he and his wife's throats are slit at their retirement home in Phoenix, Arizona. The murders are brutal and reflect an unwritten code. Mob violence only happens out of town.
If anybody got hurt or killed, it was always someplace else. It was never in Las Vegas. It was as this was pristine and sacred territory.
Sacred because Las Vegas offers the mob an opportunity that can't be found anywhere else in America, the chance to be legitimate.
They were illegal where they came from because gambling was illegal every place. They legalized it in Las Vegas. They come here and now they could become legitimate citizens. They could belong to the Chamber of Commerce. They could become very philanthropic, and they were.
Perhaps no one epitomizes this better than Mo Dalitz, a reputed mobster from Cleveland who moves to Las Vegas in the 1940s. His first investment is in a struggling, half-built casino called the Desert Inn. Dalitz uses the position not just to make money, but also to become a pillar of Las Vegas society.
I guess somebody would call him a mobster. I used to see him at the Las Vegas Country Club, sitting very quietly with his friends, playing gin. Soft-spoken, generous to a fault, respected in the community. Never saw him commit a crime. And that's the way I judge people.
But outside of Las Vegas, the heat is on the mob. In 1950, Senator Estes Kefauver begins a series of hearings around the country on organized crime, with his panel grilling such legendary mobsters as Frank Costello.
When you signed or had someone sign your naturalization papers, what did you promise to do as a citizen of the United States?
Well, I promised to obey.
Obey what?
The Constitution.
And the laws.
That's right.
The commission comes to Las Vegas the next year, holding hearings in a courthouse that still stands across the street from the mayor's office.
They wanted to make reputations on our bones, and they came out here and, of course, held these very dramatic hearings. They were on TV and publicized, cover of Time magazine, and ended up with a zero, I mean, as far as putting gambling out of business.
Instead, gambling gets even grander. In the 1950s, the Tropicana, the Stardust, and the Sands all opened for business. It's Las Vegas that's the hit now, and people flock here from all across America to experience it.
Those were the halcyon days of Sin City, when Las Vegas was the one place in buttoned-down mid-century America where you could be yourself, where you could shed whoever you were and just cut loose.
By the start of the 1960s, the mob searches for new money to fund its projects. It finds a partner in Teamsters president Jimmy Hoffa, who uses a pension fund to help spark another building spree.
The Teamsters Central States Pension Fund becomes a funnel for money to a bank in Las Vegas that owns the casinos and begins to build places like the Aladdin and Caesar's Palace and Circus and other places like that.
Vegas is glitzier than ever, but it may be the mob's last hurrah. The FBI begins targeting organized crime with wiretaps and uncovers evidence of skimming operations at several casinos. It is into this world that a young Oscar Goodman arrives from Philadelphia, ready to begin practicing criminal law. Within 3 years, his specialty is wiretap cases.
The people that the government was wiretapping in those days were all gamblers. And I had to learn about gambling in order to defend them. I had to learn what a gambling line was, what the point spreads were, what the phraseology was, what the bottom sheet was. I had to understand how bets were taken, how bets were laid off, all these kind of things, and I became a bit of an expert in it.
In 1966, billionaire Howard Hughes arrives in town too. He rents the entire top floor of the Desert Inn and ends up buying the place from Mo Dalitz and the other owners. Then he continues to buy out casino after casino until Hughes owns more than a quarter of the Strip. Major companies follow suit, and just like that, Las Vegas goes corporate.
All of a sudden, here came corporations with big bottom lines, with deep pockets, big piles of resources to invest. And all of a sudden, there wasn't enough illegal money to be able to play in that kind of game. And so mobsters sold out some of these casinos, and they felt pretty good about it because they were making money hand over fist.
Mob ownership dwindles, but not its influence. It's the 1970s, the era of the movie Casino, portrayed through the characters Nicky Santoro and Sam Ace Rothstein. Rothstein is based on Frank Lefty Rosenthal, who says he came to Las Vegas for the same reason so many others before him did.
Las Vegas was the only safe location, safe meaning legal, where a professional gambler could wager without fear of law enforcement.
Rosenthal finds a job at the Stardust and works his way up the ladder until he controls the operation. He is joined by Chicago mobster Anthony the Ant Spilatro, who is sent to oversee a mob skimming operation. Spilatro is reportedly a mob hitman and reputed to be a sadistic killer.
Gotta cut it out, I'm warning you now, right?
In one scene in Casino, his character is shown torturing someone by putting their head in a vice.
Don't make me have to do this, please, come on.
Goodman, who appeared in the movie as himself and represented both Rosenthal and Spilatro in real life, says that in person the Ant was always a gentleman.
When he would come to my office, he was as kind and gentle as one could be as far as my staff was concerned. He was always generous with me as far as my fees were concerned. And I represented him in murder cases. I represented him in racketeering cases. I represented him in illegal gambling cases. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. So as far as I'm concerned, he's not guilty.
Goodman wins every case, but in the end, Spilatro becomes too high profile for the mob. He dies like many others before him, violently and outside Las Vegas. Rosenthal survives an attempt on his own life in 1982 when his car is bombed on Sahara Avenue near the Strip. But his career in Las Vegas ends a few years later in much quieter fashion. He is unable to get a gaming license because of a minor gambling conviction from 20 years earlier in another city.
All of a sudden, what you've got is a situation here where a guy who would be perfectly acceptable in 1950s Las Vegas can't get a license. The world has changed, the rules of the game have changed, and it will never be the same again.
Major corporations are in control of the casinos, and the mob is out of the gaming business here. In 1999, Oscar Goodman gives up his criminal practice to run for mayor and wins with almost 64% of the vote. In 2003, he's re-elected with 86%. Now, the reputed mob lawyer turned mayor is a champion of his city's history. A history that includes the underworld figures who brought glitz and glamour to the barren desert.
I think to the average person, it is glamorous. Visitors from all over, they don't come here to see Mickey Mouse. They come here to get a little bit of the feel about lifting up that rock and finding a little piece of Bugsy.
Bugsy, Moe, Meyer, and many others. Men who may never be commemorated on the Strip, but who are as responsible as anyone for turning sin into a city.